They keep saying that reading the card explains the card, but what does it mean? What does it mean? What does it mean? What does it mean? Hi. Ah! What are you doing under my porch? I can teach you how to read a magic card. What will it cost me? I feel like things like this always cost something. Oh, it won't cost you anything. What are you talking about? Come here. What?
Never fear. I have certainly not taken the form of the YouTuber in order to take over his YouTube channel and his life. The YouTuber is here as he normally is, explaining cards. He doesn't know how to read a magic card. Why does he have so many magic? I mean, why do I have so many magic? Let's talk about how to read a card. This is a magic card and all of the parts of a magic card. At the top left is always the card's name. This card in particular is Shivan Dragon. It's actually a really classic magic card. Cards with the same name can have different art from one another, but if they have the same name, then all of their abilities and everything else on the card is going to be the same, even if it looks different. As a rule, cards of the same name are not different cards, though there is one that I know of. Moving from right to left, at the top right, is its mana cost. Mana is how you cast spells in Magic, which you generally get from lands, which we'll talk about lands in just a second. Specifically, this card's mana cost is 2 red and 4 generic mana. So in order to cast this card, you need to have 2 red mana and 4 mana of any color. Just below the picture on the left is its type line. Now, every card has 2 types of types. There are a bunch of different types of cards, meaning artifact, creature, enchantment, instant, land, planeswalker, sorcery, and battle, actually, which is not in this graphic, which is the first thing you're going to read. And the second thing you're going to read is its subtype or super type, which is the type of whatever thing it is. So for example, this Shivan Dragon's type is creature, its super type is dragon. So it makes it clear this is a creature card, which tells us things about the rules of the game, and it's a dragon, which, it being a dragon, can be affected by other cards. On the same line to the right is its expansion symbol. It tells you what set this card is from. You can also tell what rarity these cards are by the color of the symbol. If the symbol is just black and white, then it's common. If it's silver, then it's uncommon. If it's gold, then it's rare. And if it's orange, then it is mythic. And below that is the card's text box, so that it has its abilities, which is what the card does, if anything. Shivan Dragon, for example, has flying, which means it can only be blocked by other creatures with flying or creatures with reach. And it has an ability where you can pay 1 red mana to give it +1/+0 until end of turn, +1 power, +0 toughness until end of turn. In italics at the bottom of some cards are flavor text. Flavor text has nothing to do with the rules of the game. However, it's kind of a look-see into the world of Magic. In the bottom right, if it's a creature card, is its power and toughness. Every creature has some sort of power and toughness. On the left is its power. On the right is its toughness. On the left is how much damage it'll deal when it deals damage to a creature or a player. And on the right, its toughness is how much damage it can take before it dies. In the bottom of every card is its copyright, its artist of the actual art of the card, and its collector number, meaning the number of the card and the total number of cards in that set. We mentioned land cards when we were talking about this card, so let's look at a land. There are 5, actually kind of 6 types of basic lands. Each of these basic lands can be tapped, meaning turned sideways, in order to produce mana of its corresponding type. For example, tapping a plains makes white mana, tapping a mountain makes red mana, islands make blue mana, forests make green mana, and swamps make black mana. There's also a special type of basic land called Waste, which creates waste mana, which is purely colorless mana. And some cards, especially Eldrazi cards, want specifically colorless mana, but those won't come up super often. However, there are other types of lands as well. Generally, the land will literally tell you what it does. Often lands like dual lands add multiple mana. For example, this card, Hallowed Fountain, says that when it enters the battlefield, you can pay 2 life to have it enter untapped. Otherwise it enters tapped, and you can tap it to add a white or a blue. It literally says everything on the card. Planeswalker cards look a little bit different. There's a lot of things that are the same, like the name, the mana cost, its type and super type, its set symbol, its artist, all of that stuff. However, its text box will always look something like this. And on the bottom right, instead of a power and toughness, it's going to have its starting loyalty. Every planeswalker starts with the amount of loyalty to you equal to the number in the bottom right. In Liliana of the Veil's case, it's 3. And then once per turn, you can use one of the abilities on Liliana of the Veil, taking away or adding that much loyalty. For example, with this card, you can add a loyalty, making it 4 loyalty, to have each player discard a card. You can take away 2 loyalty to have target player sacrifice a creature, and its ultimate is -6. I'm not going to read that text box to you, but you get the point. There are also other types of special cards that look a little bit different. Instants and sorceries, for example, won't have a power and toughness, and don't enter the battlefield after you cast them. They'll just do their effect and then go immediately to the graveyard. Otherwise, the rest of the card is readable in a similar way. However, instant specifically means that it can be cast at any time you have priority, where sorcery can only be cast at the time other things can be cast. There's also a bunch of other types of cards that we're going to kind of speed through, but each of them looks a little different and might be jarring if you don't know. First off, battles are this weird sideways card. They still have the name in the top left, the mana cost in the top right. It tells you the type of it. However, in the bottom right of the battle is a number, kind of like Planeswalkers. Battles start with that many counters on it and need to be dealt damage in order to remove counters. Battles often do something when they enter, and then when all the counters are removed from it, they flip into the other side. So they get exiled and then come back transformed. Transformed means the other side of the card. Also, when you play battles, you have to choose an opponent to protect it, and they protect it like they protect themselves. In Planeswalkers, they can block for it, and when you attack that battle, they're the ones that block it. And there's a bunch of other mechanically unique cards. For example, Meld. Meld and some other transform cards. In the top left, there'll be a full moon. And then in the bottom right, there's a little tiny arrow that kind of almost points to the back of the card. In this case, it shows 7/4, which is the corresponding card's power and toughness. And Meld, you need to do something with two separate cards, and they turn into kind of one big card when they both flip over, and you kind of put them together. So it's kind of like transforming like a battle. However, you need two cards out. Leveler cards look super funky. In the text blocks, they basically have level up, and depending on the level, it can change what the card's effects are and what power and toughness they have. So for example, Lighthouse Chronologist starts as a 1/3, and every time you pay a blue, you can level it up and put a level counter on it. Once it reaches level 4, meaning it has 4 level counters on it, it turns into a 2/4, and once it reaches level 7 or more, it becomes a 3/5 and gains the effect at the beginning of each end step. If it's not your turn, take an extra turn after this one. So it's kind of like an RPG in a card. Split cards are another sideways card, kind of like battles. They're effectively 2 cards in one. Normal split cards, which looks like this, odds and ends. When you cast it, you basically pick which effect that you want. You don't get both effects, and then the full card goes to the graveyard. Now there's other types of split cards. Specifically, if it says fuse at the bottom, you can actually cast both sides of the cards at the same time if you pay the full mana value. They resolve left to right, by the way. The last kind of flip card is called Aftermath. Basically, if it's in your hand, you have to cast the right side up version of the card. So this version, you would have to cast Destined. And then once it's in your graveyard, you can actually cast Lead from your graveyard, the kind of sideways part of it, but then you have to exile it from your graveyard after you cast it. But you can't cast Lead from your hand, and you can't cast it as Destined from your graveyard. Flip cards are kind of out of style and look really, really funky. It's basically what they did before they made transform cards with like a front and a back that you just flip back and forth. Essentially what flip cards are is you cast it as the right side up version. You can tell the right side up by the set symbol in the bottom right, and by looking at the back of the card and making it right side up. And then you do something and it flips it. For example, this one will flip, and you literally turn the card around and it turns into a different card, kind of like battles or Meld or other transform cards with the new effect and whatnot. And it is treated like that flipped over card. Sagas are a really fun card where when it enters, you put a lore counter on it, and it does the effect of the number beside the corresponding lore counter. For example, when this enters, it'll have 1 lore counter. So you do the 1 lore counter ability, which is put a +1/+1 counter and up to 1 target creature. That creature becomes an artifact in addition to its other types. Then at the beginning of your first main phase, you put another lore counter on it, and then it does the second lore counter ability, destroy all non-artifact creatures. And then in the beginning of the next main phase, you put a third lore counter on it. Once it does the last ability on the saga, then you sacrifice the saga and it goes away. We have class cards, which are kind of like level up cards, except for enchantments and not creatures, and it keeps the ability of previous levels. So for example, when you first play rogue class, you'll have this first ability. You can pay 3 mana, 1 blue, 1 black, 1 generic, to also do the level 2 ability. And then you can pay 4 mana once it's level 2 in order to gain its level 3 ability. Case cards are things that do something when they enter, and then when you do something, it becomes significantly more powerful. So when you read a case card, the top ability, whenever detective enters, blah, 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 it immediately does that thing. And then the middle section tells you how to solve the case. Once you've done that thing, the case is solved at the beginning of your end step. And then this enchantment gets the ability of the thing on the bottom. Adventures are kind of cool. They're a little like split cards. Basically, the card is treated like the full thing with the text box on the bottom right and whatever. However, you can cast it as an adventure instead if you would like. So you can cast it as the normal card, as Lovestruck Beast, or cast it as Heart's Desire. If you cast it as Lovestruck Beast, it is just treated like a Lovestruck Beast, and you move on using the text box in the bottom right. However, if you cast it as its adventure, which in this case is Heart's Desire, you get that 1/1 white human creature token, and then it's exiled. exiled. And then at any point later in the game, as a sorcery obviously, you can cast Lovestruck Beast from exile. So it can be 2 cards in 1, but also it doesn't have to be. Prototype's another example of a 2 cards in 1 situation. Phyrexian Fleshgorger is a 7 mana 7/5 with Menace, Lifelink, and Ward, pay life equal to Phyrexian Fleshgorger's power. Or you can pay 3 black and have it enter as a 3/3, still with that text box, and it'll be black instead. So if you pay 2 black, 1 generic, it'll be a 3/3 Menace, Lifelink, Ward, pay life equal to Phyrexian Fleshgorger's power. You don't get to level it up or anything. You just get to decide if you want to cast the final version of the card or the prototype version of the card. No, it's a lot to remember, but it becomes really intuitive when you understand the basics of reading these Magic cards. And remember, it's always important to know what the cards in your deck do and how to read the cards in your deck. If you're playing casually, just have a chat with your opponent about how they work. And if you're playing competitively, don't be afraid to raise your hand and call for a judge and ask them. That's what they do. They're there to help you. Just like I'm there to help this YouTuber actually get off the ground. I mean, actually help me get off the ground as a YouTuber. If you like this video, please be sure to like and subscribe. Check me out on social medias. Links are above me and in the description. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.